Ahar, mateys! My name is Rachel, GNS Middle. Gilbert and Sullivan is my middle name, and my middle name is my last name. And I am here on behalf of Forbear Theatre to explore the magic of the Gilbert and Sullivan Operas by very pedantically ranking every element of them. And you may have guessed by today's introduction that today we are discussing the dialogue in Patience. I kid. We are, in fact, discussing the dialogue in the Pirates of Penzance. I had you going for a moment there. Anyway, I thought I'd do this one a little bit differently today. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go through each scene in chronological order, and then I will score them as I do them, and then right at the end we will discover how they ranked. And I will put the ranking in the spoilers as well. I don't think, from my memory, and my memory is very good on the Pirates of Penzance because I perform at least once a year. I seem to be constantly doing Pirates of Penzance, and I'm pretty confident that I know the dialogue pretty well. It's the kind of one that I could have a pretty good go at just reciting word for word, maybe apart from the first couple of scenes that are very involved. But I've played both Ruth and Mabel multiple times, and I've also directed this one twice and been in it about 10 times. So this is one that I do know really well, and I know it just not to be as strong as the others. I'm going to be honest. I would venture a guess that while Thespis and Utopia have very bizarre dialogue, and Grand Duke has bizarre but quite avant-garde and therefore clever and funny dialogue in places, Pirates, I feel, is probably third worst after Thespis and Utopia Limited. Scene number 1 takes place just after Port Opal the Pirate Sherry, and it is between the Pirate King and Frederic and Samuel and Ruth at the end, but all the pirates have interjections in it. Yes, Frederic! From today, you rank as a full-blown member of our band. Hurrah! My friends, I thank you all from the heart for your kindly wishes. Would that I could repay them as they deserve. What do you mean? Today I am out of my indentures, and today I leave you forever. But this is quite unaccountable. A keener hand at scuttling a cunarder or cutting out a piano never shipped a handspike. Yes, I have done my best for you. And why? It was my duty under my indentures, and I am the slave of duty. As a child, I was regularly apprenticed to your band. It was through an error. No matter, the mistake was ours, not yours, and I was in honour bound by it. An error? What error? I may not tell you. It would reflect upon my well-loved Ruth. Nay, dear master, my mind has long been gnawed by the cankering tooth of mystery. Better have it out at once. So, interestingly enough, whenever I've seen this scene done, or I've directed it myself, I've not really put too much thought into these jokes, like a keener hand at scuttling a cunarder or cutting out a piano, and I don't necessarily understand why they're funny. I know what they mean. I can see in the Bradley what they mean, but I don't understand why it's a funny thing. According to this also, they did change the name of the ship. Instead of P&O, they said White Star Line in some shows. A handspike is a lever, generally made of wood, fitted into a windlass or capstan to heave up an anchor or heavy chain. Never shipped a handspike. I don't understand why these lines are funny, but everyone laughs at them. And I don't know why they're laughing. Someone can help me out there. So, quite honestly, I know that people do laugh at this, but the line I find the funniest in this is, "And I am the slave of duty." That's the line I think is funniest because it's a character very obviously setting himself up. And I appreciate the kind of clunkiness of it and the awkward exposition, but I find it really charming in an absurdist Gilbertian way. So I would give this one, I would say a 5 for comedy, because it's got that moment in, but even that's not really laugh out loud funny. But the rest, I just don't see how it's funny, so I'd probably give it a 5 for comedy. Beauty/poetry, I do like the cankering tooth of mystery, and I like the way these words flow, even if I don't find them funny. They never shipped a handspike, but I wouldn't give that any more than a 6. Then I'd say in terms of the fact that you understand a bit about who Frederic is, I'd maybe give this scene just about a 6 for character as well. But you don't really learn what he thinks about that. I am a slave of duty. Okay. He likes to do his duty, right? Is that a real characteristic that people have? I guess people can be very moralistic and very principled, so maybe that does make sense. But to me, that's not a particularly interesting character trait, so I can really only give that a 6 for character. However, I do appreciate this does get narrative across very quickly, and I think that's going to be quite true of all these scenes. I'd give this an 8 for narrative importance. Do I want to give it a 9? I'm going to give it an 8, not a 9, because I feel that even though we are setting up the initial song very well, that's where we get the true information of how Frederic got here. But I do think this is narratively a very good opening scene, and I think this might be a pattern. A lot of narrative importance and not too much character or maybe even comedy, but we'll see. So this second scene, this is the long one. This is the one between Ruth, Frederic, Pirate King Samuel, and all. Oh, pardon, Frederic, pardon. Rise, sweet one, I have long forgiven you. The 2 words were so much alike. They were. They still are, though years have rolled over their heads. But this afternoon my obligation ceases. Individually, I love you all with affection unspeakable, but collectively I look upon you with a disgust that amounts to absolute detestation. Oh, pity me, my beloved friends, for such is my sense of duty that, once out of my indentures, I shall feel myself bound to devote myself heart and soul to your extermination. Poor lad, poor lad. Well, Frederic, if you conscientiously feel that it is your duty to destroy us, we cannot blame you for acting on that conviction. Always act in accordance with the dictates of your conscience, my boy, and chance the consequences. Besides, we can offer you but little temptation to remain with us. We don't seek to make piracy pay. I'm sure I don't know why, but we don't. I know why, but alas, I mustn't tell you. It wouldn't be right. Why not, my boy? It's only 11:30, and you are one of us until the clock strikes 12. True, and until then you are bound to protect our interests. Hear, hear! Well then, it is my duty, as a pirate, to tell you that you are too tender-hearted. For instance, you make a point of never attacking a weaker party than yourselves, and when you attack a stronger party, you invariably get thrashed. There's some truth in that. Then again, you make a point of never molesting an orphan. Of course. We are orphans ourselves, and know what it is. Yes, but it has got about. And what is the consequence? Everyone we capture says he's an orphan. The last 3 ships we took proved to be manned entirely by orphans, and so we had to let them go. One would think that Great Britain's mercantile navy was recruited solely from her orphan asylums, which we know is not the case. But hang it all, you wouldn't have us absolutely merciless. There's my difficulty. Until 12 o'clock I would, after 12 I wouldn't. Was ever a man placed in so delicate a situation? And Ruth, your own Ruth, whom you love so well, and who has won her middle-aged way into your boyish heart, what is to become of her? Oh, he will take you with him. Well, Ruth, I feel some little difficulty about you. It is true that I admire you very much, but I have been constantly at sea since I was 8 years old, and yours is the only woman's face I have seen during that time. I think it is a sweet face. It is. Oh, it is. I say I think it is. That is my impression. But as I have never had an opportunity of comparing you with other women, it is just possible I may be mistaken. True. What a terrible thing it would be if I were to marry this innocent person and then find out that she is, on the whole, plain. Oh, Ruth is very well indeed. Yes, there are the remains of a fine woman about Ruth. Do you really think so? I do. Then I will not be so selfish as to take her from you. In justice to her and in consideration for you, I shall leave her behind. No, Frederic, this must not be. We are rough men who lead a rough life, but we are not so utterly heartless as to deprive thee of thy love. I think I am right in saying that there is not one here who would rob thee of this inestimable treasure for all the world holds dear. Not one! No, I thought there wasn't. Keep thy love, Frederic. Keep thy love. You're very good, I'm sure. Well, it's the top of the tide and we must be off. Farewell, Frederic. When the process of extermination begins, let our deaths be as swift and painless as you can conveniently make them. I will. By the love I have for you, I swear it. Would that you could render this extermination unnecessary by accompanying me back to civilization. No, Frederic, it cannot be. I don't think much of our profession, but contrasted with respectability, it is comparatively honest. No, Frederic, I shall live and die a pirate king. This is a very long scene. I do think that this scene suffers a little bit because of its length. However, having said that, there are some really, really funny moments in it. I know that this scene is ridiculously funny, and it's so funny no matter how it's said, and I can prove this unequivocally because when Forbear Theatre performed Pirates of Penzance at the festival, we had a little bit of an issue where one of the characters thought their cue was a different one and so jumped a whole passage of dialogue, including Ruth's aria. And even though they all realised instantly what had happened and couldn't get out of it, and they knew, oh no, what we're going to do, and they ended up actually getting back on track. It was quite impressive. They went round in this big loop, but you could just see the fear in their eyes, and it was really, really frightening as a person watching it, like, oh god, this is, every director's worst nightmare. But they did get back on track. But the point is that even though they were delivering the lines knowing, oh my god, we've really messed up, how on earth are we going to get out of this? The audience was still laughing at every single line. Like, that is how funny some of the lines are in this scene. I don't think it's quite Mikado level funny, I would venture to say, but I do love, the two words were so much alike. They were, they still are. Just things like that. And the matter-of-factness with which Frederic speaks just about their extermination. He's going to make a really big effort to make their deaths really quick. And I like to think that he genuinely means that and that there's no sarcasm there. I think the funniest reading of all of these lines is if the characters truly mean them and that there's no sarcasm there. Obviously, with the exception of that bit with passing Ruth back and forth. I do think the Pirate King and the pirates do not really want Ruth around, and that is quite blatant from their lines. But I guess there is also a reading of that where they actually both genuinely think she's lovely, but they're just trying to be polite, and only Ruth takes offence to it. I guess there are many ways of playing that, but what I don't like to see is when Frederic seems to know that Ruth is plain as well. I think that takes away from his innocence, and I love how innocent Frederic is. But having said that, innocence I don't think is a very remarkable character trait, and bizarrely, even though I would probably give this scene an 8 for comedy, I do think it's got some really funny bits in it, but I think it is very long, and I don't think the comedy quite lasts the whole scene. I do think there are moments it dips in and out of comedy. And kind of similar to narrative importance, I'd only give that an 8, because even though it's all narrative, it is long and it's possible to lose concentration because of how much information you're having to absorb. So I give it 2 8s for that, no higher. I give it a 7 for its beauty/poetry. I do think that there are some lovely moments in there. I do think the bit about the orphans is really well written. I also think the bit about making their deaths as swift and painless as he can conveniently make them. There's some beautiful turns of phrases in this scene, and I do think that earns it a 7. But I'm thinking of the ones I gave an 8 to with Dr. Daly and some ones with Sir Joseph in the last video, and I don't think this quite earns an 8. As far as character is concerned, yeah, I just don't really see too much character in this scene at all. As I've been saying in previous videos, it does seem like all these characters and pirates just want to do their duty, and to me that's not particularly interesting. I do appreciate that he is attempting to get some character across. We are certainly learning about Frederic's moral principles, and we do learn a bit about the Pirate King and how he is remaining a pirate because he feels that contrasted with normal life, it's actually a very honest profession. And I suppose that's learning a bit about him. So I'll give it a 7. I might have given it a 6, but I will give it a 7 for character. This next scene is one that I think is going to turn out to be one of my favourites in the opera. Is between Frederic and Ruth. I know this extremely well because I have played Ruth twice, and yeah, I just know it well. It's always one I hear when I'm waiting to come on as Mabel as well. I just love this scene. Oh, take me with you. I cannot live if I am left behind. Ruth, I will be quite candid with you. You are very dear to me, as you know, but I must be circumspect. You see, you are considerably older than I. A lad of 21 usually looks for a wife of 17. A wife of 17? You shall find me a wife of 1,000. No, but I shall find you a wife of 47, and that is quite enough. Ruth, tell me, candidly, and without reserve, compared with other women, how are you? I will answer you truthfully, master. I have a slight cold, but otherwise I am quite well. I'm sorry for your cold, but I was referring rather to your personal appearance. Compared with other women, are you beautiful? I have been told so, dear master. Ah, but lately? Oh no, years and years ago. What do you think of yourself? It is a delicate question to answer, but I think I am a fine woman. That is your candid opinion. Yes, I should be deceiving you if I told you otherwise. Thank you, Ruth. I believe you, for I am sure that you would not practice on my inexperience. I wish to do the right thing, and if, I say if, you really are a fine woman, your age shall be no obstacle to our union. Climbing over rocky mountain, skipping rivulet, and fountain passing where the willows quiver. Hark! Surely I hear voices. Who has ventured to approach our all but inaccessible lair? Can it be Custom House? No, it does not sound like Custom House. Confusion! It is the voices of young girls. If he should see them, I am lost. By all that's marvellous, a bevy of beautiful maidens. Lost, lost, lost! How lovely, how surpassingly lovely is the plainest of them. What grace, what delicacy, what refinement. And Ruth told me she was beautiful. What I really like about this scene is it does have real stakes in it. You've got one character clearly trying to conceal something from another character. And the stakes are really high for Ruth because she's worried that after 17 years of being in love with Frederic, according to the song, she might now lose him unless she plays this very well. And the way she goes about this is horrible. I feel some sympathy surrounding Ruth, but definitely what she does here is not okay. So I think in terms of character, I give this quite a high mark because it really shows you what kind of people these are, how trusting Frederic is, and how Ruth is able to plot in order to get what she wants. So I would give this scene an 8 for character. I think it does a really good job at doing that. I don't think it's amazing for beauty/poetry, but there are some lovely turns of phrases in there. Again, your age shall be no obstacle to our union. And that whole wordplay with a wife of 17, you shall find me a wife of 1,000. No, but I shall find you a wife of 47, and that is quite enough. I feel like I want to give beauty and poetry a 6, but then I do want to give comedy an 8 as well, because while I think the lines are very funny, I don't know if they're particularly beautiful. There are, as I say, there are some nice turns of phrases in there, but I don't think it's really Gilbert's best. So character, 8. Comedy, 8. Beauty/poetry, 6. Narrative. The thing is, this is very important in Frederic's arc, in Frederic's story arc, which is an important part of the Pirates of Penzance, but it doesn't really have much to do with the pirates themselves. I think with that in mind, I'm going to give it a 7, just because it's mainly centred on just one character in his journey and also Ruth's journey. But where that's the case, where it's more of showing characters having a relationship, I would give the marks to character rather than narrative. I also actually forgot to mention how funny I find that line, "Who has ventured to approach our all but inaccessible lair?" It's just such a clunky line, but it's clunky in such a hilarious way. So yes, I do think that this loses marks for beauty poetry that it then gains in comedy. So that 8 for comedy is very well deserved. Again, I don't think it's quite Mikado level funny, but it is great. Scene number 4 is between Edith, Kate and Isabel. What a picturesque spot! I wonder where we are. And I wonder where Papa is. We have left him ever so far behind. Oh, he will be here presently. Remember, poor Papa is not as young as we are, and we have come over a rather difficult country. But how thoroughly delightful it is to be so entirely alone. Why, in all probability, we are the first human beings who ever set foot on this enchanting spot. Except the mermaids. It's the very place for mermaids, who are only human beings down to the waist, and who can't be said strictly to set foot anywhere. Tails they may, but feet they cannot. But what shall we do until Papa and the servants arrive with the luncheon? We are quite alone, and the sea is as smooth as glass. Suppose we take off our shoes and stockings and paddle. Yes, yes, the very thing! Okay, so for me, this immediately gets a 10 out of 10 for comedy. It's so ridiculous, but every single line in this scene makes me laugh. It is like Gilbert is doing a parody of himself already with how stupid these lines are. But again, what we gain in comedy, we lose in other areas. I mean, narrative importance is, I guess it's a 5. Oh, is it a 6? I suppose it's a 6 because we are learning that Papa is coming and that they think they're alone. So yeah, okay, I'll give it a 6 for narrative importance. I will only, though, give this a 3 for character. Oh God, these are anti-characters. These are not characters at all. And then beauty/poetry. Again, I just don't see much beauty or poetry in these lines at all. I'll give it a 5 for that, honestly. I don't see anything that's actively ugly. There's nothing in here poetry-wise that the average person couldn't have written, I don't think. So I really, really love this scene. I cannot overstate how much I love this scene, but it is mainly just because I find it utterly hilarious. It's really good as just a kind of parody out of context, but it doesn't tell you anything at all about these people, and these characters aren't really characters, but that doesn't mean they cannot be tremendously fun to play. I know that it might seem sometimes that I'm a big snob about characters needing to have complexity, etc. But honestly, if you remember back to my soprano characters video, even though I think that Princess Ida is the better crafted character out of her and Julia, like, nothing is going to beat how fun Julia is to play. And so I think that there is value in that. And I don't mean to be a snob about these scenes that are just silliness and nothing more. I do think this has its place in Gilbert and Sullivan, and I value its place. So the 5th scene in the Pirates of Penzance, which comes a lot later than the previous scene I've discussed, we get Stop Ladies Pray, Maiden Breast, Poor Wandering One, Beautifully Blue the Sky, Stay We Must Not Lose Our Senses, and then the Major General's entrance. So there are 6 numbers in between the last scene and this one. That is crazy. But this one is between the Major General, Kate, Sam, generally the girls, Pirate King, Mabel. In fact, I think almost all the characters speak in this scene. And now that I've introduced myself, I should like to have some idea of what's going on. Oh, Papa, Permit me, I'll explain in 2 words. We propose to marry your daughters. Dear me.
Against our wills, Papa, against our wills.
Oh, but you mustn't do that. May I ask? This is a picturesque uniform, but I'm not familiar with it. What are you? We are all single gentlemen. Yes, I gathered that. Anything else? No, nothing else.
Papa, don't believe them. They are pirates, the famous Pirates of Penzance.
The Pirates of Penzance? I have often heard of them.
All except this gentleman, who was a pirate once, but who is out of his indentures today, and who means to lead a blameless life evermore.
But wait a bit. I object to pirates as sons-in-law. We object to major generals as fathers-in-law. But we waive that point. We do not press it. We look over it.
Ha! An idea.
And do you mean to say that you would deliberately rob me of these, the sole remaining props of my old age, and leave me to go through the remainder of my life unfriended, unprotected, and alone? Well, yes, that's the idea. Tell me. Have you ever known what it is to be an orphan? Oh, dash it all! Here we are again. I ask you, have you ever known what it is to be an orphan? Orphan? Yes, orphan. Have you ever known what it is to be one? I say, orphan. Orphan, orphan, orphan. I don't think we quite understand one another. I ask you, have you ever known what it is to be an orphan? and you say orphan. As I understand you, you are merely repeating the word orphan to show that you understand me. I didn't repeat the word orphan. Pardon me, you did indeed. I only repeated it once. True, but you repeated it, but not orphan. Stop! I think I see where we are getting confused. When you said orphan, did you mean orphan, a person who has lost his parents, or orphan, frequently? Ah, I beg pardon. I see what you mean. Frequently. Ah, you said orphan, frequently. No, only once. Exactly, you said orphan, frequently, only once. So, I have a long history with just being utterly obsessed with this scene. And this is like another one that, for me, gets a clear 10 out of 10 for God. It reminded me when I was reading that my face could have broke a bit when this bit came. Because I remember that when I did it in summer of 2020, during the pandemic, the guy who was playing the sergeant, who was just a chorus pirate in the first half, he was the only one that remembered to say the orphan, orphan, orphan. The king said, I say, orphan, and this random guy in the back just goes, orphan, orphan, orphan. And everyone else... it was just one of the best moments ever. But the whole confusion over the word orphan, I happen to think is beautiful. I personally would have actually eliminated the last 9. I would have had it go into the song on No, Only Once. I actually think that's a funnier pre-song line, but I'd never change it because it's so well known that people would think we've made a mistake, so I wouldn't do that. But the whole confusion. And Mabel's line, I find really funny, that except for this gentleman who was a pirate once, etc. Because she says the line and then it's just not acknowledged again. She just goes, Papa, I don't believe them. They are pirates, the famous Pirates of Penzance. Against our wills, Papa. But again, this insistence on comedy just means we don't learn anything about their character. We don't even really learn too much about the Major General's character from his song. I mean, who is this guy? He thinks he can do stuff and he's actually not that good. Like, it's really baffling who these people actually are. Yes, there's narrative, things are happening in the story. I don't think it's like a particular turning point. The real turning point in this first act is when the pirates turn up. But this scene, I don't think it's where the major dramatic action is happening in. So I'd only give this an 8 out of 10 for narrative importance, but 10 out of 10 for comedy. Kitty's snoring, do you hear? She's dreaming because her cheeks are also going. Anyway, so 8 out of 10 for narrative importance, 10 out of 10 for comedy. Again, just there's not too much beauty in these lines. I could only give it a 6 for that. There's no moments of poetry that I really feel match up to what Gilbert's capable of generally. And then character, again, there's not really much character development. We maybe learn that the Major General is capable of lying, and it's restated that the pirates are upset about hurting orphans, so I guess I'll give it a 6, but that's the maximum I can give it. So all in all, I really, really like this scene. I think it's very funny, but again, it is just a comic scene and there's not too much character in it, which is a shame. So the next scene is the one between Mabel, Frederic, and the Major General at the start of Act II, where the Major General begins to grow a conscience.
Oh, Frederic, cannot you, in the calm excellence of your wisdom, reconcile it with your conscience to say something that will relieve my father's sorrow?
I will try, dear Mabel.
But why does he sit night after night in this draughty old ruin?
Why do I sit here? To escape from the pirates' clutches, I describe myself as an orphan, and, heaven help me, I am no orphan. I come here to humble myself before the tombs of my ancestors, and to implore their pardon for having brought dishonour on the family escutcheon. But you forget, sir, that you only bought the property a year ago, and the stucco on your baronial hall is scarcely dry.
Frederic, in this chapel are ancestors. You cannot deny that.
With the estate I bought the chapel and its contents. I don't know whose ancestors they were, but I know whose ancestors they are, and I shudder to think that their descendant by purchase, if I may so describe myself, should have brought disgrace upon what, I have no doubt, was an unstained escutcheon. Be comforted. Had you not acted as you did, these reckless men would assuredly have called in the nearest clergyman and have married your large family on the spot. I thank you for your proffered solace, but it is unavailing. I assure you, Frederic, that such is the anguish and remorse I feel at the abominable falsehood by which I escaped these easily deluded pirates, that I would go to their simple-minded chief this very night and confess all. Did I not fear that the consequences would be most disastrous to myself? At what time does your expedition march against these scoundrels? At 11. And before midnight I hope to have atoned for my involuntary association with the pestilent scourges by sweeping them from the face of the earth. And then, dear Mabel, you will be mine. Are your devoted followers at hand? They are. They only await my orders. So yeah, I do think this is a funny scene. I don't think it's quite as funny as the other ones I've been talking about. I'd give it a 7. I think that the idea that he's gained these ancestors is quite silly, but that's the main joke in the scene, and while it is laugh out loud funny, it is the only joke in it. So I'll give it a 7 for comedy. I do think it does narrative very well, this scene. I think that we are reminding ourselves of what's just happened for the Act 1 finale, which was a long time ago. And we are learning that this is the new problem, because we left Act 1 with everyone happy, but now there's a new obstacle, there's a new conflict, and that conflict is in the Major General's head. But we're also reminded that he told a lie as well. So I do think narratively this is very good. And it delivers a narrative in a comedic way as well, which is even better. As far as character is concerned, we don't learn too much more about Frederic. We've already got this idea that he is the hero of the piece, that he is constantly trying to do what's right. So we already know that about him. But we do learn a bit more about the Major General, how he also has this compulsion to do what's right as well. Even though he seemed quite able to tell a lie in the first half, now he's starting to question it. So I would give the scene a 7 for character as well. So 7 for comedy, 7 for character. And I also think 7 for beauty/poetry. I think that this scene does do a good job there as well. The Major General, much like Joseph Porter, is one of the more verbose characters, and I do like his turn of phrase. I think where narrative importance is concerned, I would give this one an 8. I do think it progresses the narrative a bit, but it's mostly reminding us of what's already happened, but it's attaching new emotions to it. So I will give narrative importance an 8. And then comedy, a 7, character, a 7, and beauty/poetry, a 7 as well. The 7th scene in the Pirates of Penzance is between Frederic, Ruth, and the Pirate King, and it runs somewhat thus. Upon my word, this is most curious, most absurdly whimsical. 5 1/4? No one would think of it to look at me. You were glad now, I'll be bound, that you spared us. You would have never forgiven yourself when you discovered that you had killed 2 of your comrades. My comrades? I'm afraid you don't appreciate the delicacy of your position. You were apprenticed to us until I reached my 21st year. No, until you reached your 21st birthday. And going by birthdays, you are as yet only 5 1/4. You don't mean to say you're going to hold me to that? No, we merely remind you of the fact and leave the rest to your sense of duty. Your sense of duty? Don't put it on that footing. As I was merciful to you just now, be merciful to me. I implore you not to insist on the letter of your bond just as the cup of happiness was at my lips. We insist on nothing. We content ourselves with pointing out to you your duty. Your duty. Well, you have appealed to my sense of duty, and my duty is only too clear. I abhor your infamous calling. I shudder at the thought that I have ever been mixed up with it. But duty is before all. At any price, I will do my duty. Bravely spoken. Come, you are one of us once more. Lead on. I follow. Oh, horror! What is the matter? Ought I to tell you? No, I cannot do it, and yet, as one of your band... Speak out, I charge you by that sense of conscientiousness to which we have never yet appealed in vain. General Stanley, the father of my Mabel. Yes. He escaped from you on the plea that he was an orphan. He did?
It breaks my heart to betray the honoured father of the girl I adore, but as your apprentice I have no alternative. It is my duty to tell you that General Stanley is no orphan.
What?
More than that, he never was one.
Am I to understand that, to save his contemptible life, he dared to practice on our credulous simplicity?
Our revenge shall be swift and terrible.
We will go and collect our band and attack Tremorden Castle this very night. But stay, not a word. He is doomed.
What has only just struck me about this scene is that the Pirate King is actually being quite hypocritical here, because him and Ruth, all the way through this scene, they know they have no real legal recourse to adopt Frederic back into their band. So they're playing on his desire to do his duty, or in other words, they are playing on his simplicity, because they know exactly how he's going to respond to what they're saying. Yet he himself criticises the Major General for practicing on his credulous simplicity, i.e. their vulnerability when it comes to orphans. So it is interesting here, that hypocrisy, and I've never noticed that before. That's really cool. It's so nice when you notice new things about scenes. Okay, so this is probably the most narratively successful scene in the show, and it also attaches emotions onto that narrative. And you get to see all three characters in play. Maybe not so much Ruth, actually. You only really get to see probably Frederic and the Pirate King. You get to see both of their vulnerabilities and the fact that both of them have fallen for this trick, or just this appeal to their duty or appeal to their orphanhood, if that makes sense. So narratively, I would give this a 9. I think it conveys narrative really successfully. And character as well. As much as there are characters in the Pirates of Penzance, this scene really highlights them, so I give it an 8 for that. Beauty, poetry. Again, it's just not Gilbert's best, sadly. But I do admire some of the Pirate King's turns of phrases. He dared to practice on our credulous simplicity. I would give it a 7 for that. I do think it is really lovely Gilbertian language, so I give it a 7. But then for comedy, there really aren't too many funny moments in this scene, and probably for quite good reason. I would give it a 6 rather than anything lower, because I do like, and more than that, he never was one. And the absolute conviction of these characters is somewhat silly and makes it heightened and therefore just quite funny, even if it's not laugh out loud funny. So I think the 6 is relatively well deserved, but it's nowhere near on the comic level of some of these other scenes we've been talking about. So yeah. 9 for narrative importance, 8 for character, 7 for beauty/poetry, and a 6 for comedy. This next scene is the final dialogue scene in A Pirates of Penzance. And some people wouldn't even class this as a proper dialogue scene because there's kind of singing in it, but for the purposes of this, it is a dialogue scene. And that is a scene between Mabel and the policeman.
Sergeant, approach. Young Frederic was to have led you to death and glory.
That is not a pleasant way of putting it.
No matter. He will not so lead you, for he has allied himself once more with his old associates.
He has acted shamefully.
You speak falsely. You know nothing about it. He has acted nobly.
He has acted nobly.
Dearly as I loved him before, his heroic sacrifice to his sense of duty has endeared him to me tenfold. He has done his duty. I will do mine. Go ye, and do yours.
Righto. This is perplexing. We cannot understand it at all. Still, as he is actuated by a sense of duty, that makes a difference, of course. At the same time, we repeat, we cannot understand it at all. No matter. Our course is clear. We must do our best to capture these pirates alone. It is most distressing to us to be the agents whereby our erring fellow creatures are deprived of that liberty which is so dear to all. But we should have thought of that before we joined the force. We should. It's too late now. It is. There are so many things that I find utterly hysterical about this scene. Just the chorus of policemen, the actual content of what they're saying, Mabel's lines, just her heroism. It's almost her lack of character. It's almost what makes this so funny. In the same way that Frederic's just utter hero status and his complete unrealism makes him funny, I do think we have something similar with Mabel here. This one also just gets a 10 out of 10 for comedy for me. Like, these scenes, honestly, they're so funny. I don't think they're the best scenes at all. In fact, I think every single one of them has currently marked lower than most of the scenes in Pinafore. But I just happen to think that they are so funny in such a specific way that it is almost like Gilbert is becoming a parody of himself, but in a very successful way, in a very wholesome way. It's like he's poking fun of himself. It's very sweet. So I definitely have to give this a 10 out of 10 for comedy. I'm just so utterly fond of this. But I do think that's where it's going to have most of its marks. But actually, I don't know, this scene, you know, character-wise, I do think you learn quite a bit about the sergeant. So I would give this a 7 for character, actually. For what Mabel lacks in character, you really do get to learn a lot about the policemen and why they're doing what they're doing and what they feel about it in just this really tiny passage that they get. And it's delivered in such a hilarious way, which makes the narrative clearer. But then, speaking of narrative, yes, information gets portrayed, so it automatically gets a 7, but I don't know if it gets any higher than that, because what the policemen feel about what's happening isn't strictly relevant to the narrative. We've only really just met the policemen a couple of songs ago, so I don't think we're terribly invested in their emotions, even if it is very funny. So narratively, I give it a 7. Character-wise, I give it a 7. But beauty and poetry, I think I would give this an 8, you know, because like Mabel's line and the sergeant's line, they're really beautiful, actually. Dearly as I loved him before, his heroic sacrifice to his sense of duty has endeared him to me tenfold. Maybe the double use of dear, I think probably it only gets a 7 for beauty/poetry, but I almost gave it an 8, so I think it gets a 10 and then 3 7s. I think this is a tremendously successful scene. So now that I've scored it all, I now get to see how they rank. Okay, so I've got all the scores, and similarly to what I found with The Sorcerer and HMS Pinafore, is that in the individual operas, the quality of the scenes doesn't really vary too much. They all have quite a consistent tone so far. There was a bit more variance, I think, in Thespis because some scenes really hit and some didn't. But generally in Sorcerer, they were all good. And in Pinafore, they were, again, all pretty good. And actually one was better than I thought all the scenes in Sorcerer were. But while no scene here has made it to the top spot, the highest mark here was a 31. I do think that the Pirates dialogue on the whole is actually better than I thought it was before I started this video. I don't think it's as good as the Pinafore or the Sorcerer dialogue, because we were getting 34s, 35s. I think we even got a 36 or higher in one of the Pinafore scenes. But here we don't quite reach that standard. Still, nothing's done below half marks. So at the bottom in number 8, we have the Edith, Kate and Isabel scene, because apart from that really high mark for comedy, it didn't do particularly well anywhere else. And then second from bottom is that opening scene with Frederic, Samuel, the King and Ruth, which I didn't really think was particularly funny, and while it delivered narrative very well, that was really all it did. So both these first scenes had one strong area, but all the other areas were kind of weak. Number 6 goes to Mabel, Major General and Frederic at the top of Act 2. This one and the next one actually both got 29 points, but I do think these fell in the right order, actually. And then the next scene is the Ruth and Frederic scene, which I think is really good. All these next ones came really close together. We got 2 on 29, then we got 3 on 30 and 1 on 31. So I'm going to have to do something to like vary these scores. Maybe I need to add a new category or something. But I do think those two fell in the right order. I think the least good of these scenes, so number 4, would be the Frederic, Samuel, King and Ruth scene that immediately goes after Ruth's song. And the reason I'm putting at the bottom of those 3 is because even though it does do quite well across the board, It doesn't do really well in any one category, and also it is very long, and I do find that that does hamper it slightly, so I will put that in number 4. Number 3, I'm going to give to the Pirate King, Ruth and Frederic, so that's the in-between Paradox and Away Away, because I do think that that one is just a bit cleaner, and the stakes are really high, and it might not be as funny, but it is a very dramatically interesting scene with some exploration of Frederic's and the Pirate King's characters. Number 2 is the scene just after the Major General's song, which is where the Orphan often confusion happens. I just have to put this one second for its iconicness. I think it's such a famous scene, and for such good reason. I happen to think it is hilarious. Some people just don't like this at all. I just happen to think it's... Well, if you don't like this scene, like, what do you like about Gilbert and Sullivan? Like, this is what they do best, surely. But then coming in at number 1 is the Mabel and Policeman scene, which I knew was really good. I didn't actually expect it was going to get number 1, but now that it has, I do think it does deserve it. It's so clean and funny and delivers character so well. I mean, I actually only gave it a 7 for character, but I could have given it an 8 because it does do Mabel justice and it does do the policeman justice too, considering we've only just met them as well, so I think that's a really good thing. And it's powerful in a way that it depicts Mabel as a hero, but in a way that's quite funny. Literally every single line in that scene is funny. And is it because it's delivered as plain song? Well, yeah, kind of. But the lines in themselves are also just hilarious. I find this scene incredibly successful, and I'm really happy it's got the top place. So let me know if you actually found this format of doing the dialogue videos a bit better. It was actually a bit easier for me because as I got to kind of perform the dialogue to a screen, it really helped me understand how I would deliver the lines if I was the character. And that means that I'm judging it consistently, like I'm not judging it based on any other performance other than my own, like how I visualise the lines being said in my mind. And I'm certainly not saying that my reading of the line is the best interpretation, it's just it is good to be consistent, I think. So that is it for that video. This is only filmed 2 days after the trios video, so I still don't know which got number 1 of that, I'm afraid. But Kitty has been sleeping the whole time. Isn't she such a lovely girl? Aren't you so lovely, Kitty? I'll let her sleep. Remember to like and subscribe. It makes me really, really happy when people subscribe. So please do that, and I'll be very happy. And I have Jack Sparrow eyeliner and a headscarf